Reed Langford had poured every dollar, every hour, and every sleepless night into a company his wife once called his little hobby. While he made cold calls late at night from a spare bedroom, Serena managed their household finances and quietly decided he was not worth the bet. She had the divorce papers drawn up before she ever told him she was leaving. She took the house, the savings, and support. She left him the company in writing, on record, calling it a liability she wanted nothing to do with. Then Reed closed a massive federal contract, and shortly afterward, his ex-wife walked into his lobby with a lawyer at her side and a legal motion in hand, looked him in the eye, and told him she was entitled to her share of everything they built together. She said it like it was reasonable, like she had not signed a document with her own hand, walking away from all of it. She looked at him like he was still the man she had walked away from. She had no idea who was standing in front of her now. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The name on the building was his, a towering structure of glass and steel rising above Peachtree Street, and right there near the top, in large letters, Langford Supply Group. Reed noticed it every single morning when he pulled into the parking deck, not with pride exactly, more like quiet confirmation. Like checking a fact he still needed to verify. Inside his corner office, the Atlanta skyline stretched wide behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning sun cut clean across his desk, lighting up the stack of documents that Paige had placed in front of him. She always arrived ready. She always worked the same way, quietly, precisely, without needing to be asked twice about anything. "Last quarter's numbers first," Paige said, settling into the chair across from him. She was sharp-eyed and had the rare gift of saying exactly as much as needed and nothing more. She flipped open her binder. Revenue is up significantly from the same quarter last year. The Charlotte office posted its best month since we opened it. Houston is close behind. Reed nodded and turned to the page she referenced. His eyes moved down the columns of figures. Hundreds of employees now across 3 cities. Offices with furniture he had actually picked out. A logistics operation that moved product for pharmaceutical distributors, government agencies, and mid-size manufacturers across multiple states. He remembered the room where it started, a spare bedroom in a rented house in East Point, a used laptop he had bought off a guy at night school, a legal pad with a column of cold call numbers he had pulled from industry directories at the public library. He had worked a full day at a freight brokerage, come home, eaten whatever was fast, and then gone into that room and dialed numbers late into the night. Some nights, he kept going even later. The carpet in there had been the color of old mustard, and it had smelled faintly of something he never identified. He had spent countless hours in that room without a single person telling him it was going to work. His grandfather had laid concrete for decades. His father had spent many of his best years on his knees in other people's buildings installing HVAC units, coming home with grease on his forearms and a quiet dignity that Reed had not fully understood until much later. Neither of them had ever worked in a building with their name on it. Reed thought about that more than he let on. "And then there is this," Paige said. She slid the top document toward him. A thick packet tabbed and highlighted, the federal seal on the cover page, the massive federal contract, a logistics management deal with the federal government that Langford Supply Group had spent many months competing for. It had been public record for a short time. The Atlanta Business Chronicle had run a piece on it. A national trade publication had picked it up soon after. "Performance benchmarks are aggressive," Paige said, "but we are already built for them. I do not see a quarter where we are not ahead of projection." She paused, then added with the smallest lift at the corner of her mouth, "Your little hobby did all right." Reed looked up from the page. She said it without apology and without cruelty. She had heard him use that phrase once when he told her the short version of the divorce. She had never brought it up again until right now, and the way she said it, flat and factual, the words landing like a verdict, made something shift in his chest, a release of pressure he had not realized he had been holding. "Yeah," he said. "It did." He turned back to the contract, initialed where Harrison had tabbed it, turned each page carefully the way he always handled documents that mattered, not rushing, not performing efficiency, just doing the thing right, because doing it right was the only method he had ever trusted. He was on the 3rd tab when the phone on his desk buzzed. He pressed the speaker button without looking up. "Go ahead." The voice of his front desk associate came through, careful and slightly uncertain, the tone people used when they were not sure how the next sentence was going to land. "Mr. Langford, I am sorry to interrupt. There is a woman down here in the lobby. She says she is your wife, and there is a man with her. He says he is an attorney." The room was very quiet. Paige did not move. She did not look away from him, but she went still in the way people go still when they understand that something has just changed in a room. Reed set his pen down on the desk, slowly. He looked at the federal contract in front of him, at his name printed at the top of the page, at the seal, at the figures that represented everything the spare bedroom had been reaching toward. Then he pressed the button again. "Tell them I will be down shortly." He did not rush. That was the first thing. He went to his private bathroom, ran the cold tap, and pressed both hands flat against the edge of the sink. The marble was cool beneath his palms. He looked at his reflection in the mirror above it, the gray threading through his close-cut hair, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the face of a man who had earned every single thing waiting for him upstairs on that desk. He straightened his tie, a deep navy, no pattern. He smoothed the front of his jacket. He looked at himself for a long moment. Then he turned off the tap and walked out. The elevator opened on the lobby, and Reed stepped out into the cool, marble-floored entrance of his building. The space was clean and deliberately understated. Dark stone floors, a reception desk of pale wood, the company name etched into the wall behind it in brushed steel. He had approved every detail of this lobby himself. He had stood in this exact spot and imagined it before it existed. He saw her immediately. Serena stood near the security desk, and she looked exactly the way she always looked. Composed, polished, dressed in a charcoal wrap dress that said she belonged in rooms like this. Her hair was pulled back. Her posture was perfect. She had the practiced ease of a woman who had never once walked into a room without first deciding how she wanted to be perceived in it. Beside her stood a man Reed did not recognize. He was wearing a gray suit that fit well and carrying a dark leather portfolio under one arm. He had the smooth, unhurried expression of a man who made his living saying difficult things in pleasant voices. Serena saw Reed cross the lobby. Her face arranged itself into something warm and civil. Not a real smile, something engineered to look like one. "Reed," she said his name the way you say the name of someone you have already decided how to handle. The man in the gray suit extended his hand. "Elliot Greer. I represent Ms. Hargrove." Reed shook it once, said nothing. Serena did not wait for the pleasantries to finish. She never had been good at patience when she wanted something. "I have been reading about the federal contract," she said. Her voice was smooth, reasonable, the same voice she used in every hard conversation, the one designed to make the other person feel like disagreeing would be unreasonable. "A massive federal contract, Reed." She tilted her head slightly. "That is a remarkable thing." He looked at her. He did not respond. "I think we both know," she continued, "that I am entitled to my share of what we built together. I held this household up for years. My salary paid our bills while you were getting that company off the ground. My benefits covered us both. I made it possible for you to take those risks." She paused, letting it settle. "That entitles me to something. My attorney agrees." Greer nodded on cue, smooth and practiced, already reaching into the leather portfolio. "We believe the original settlement did not fully account for Ms. Hargrove's contribution to the marital estate," he said, "and we are prepared to demonstrate a basis for." He placed a document on the security desk and slid it toward Reed. Reed picked it up. He read the first page without expression. His eyes moved down the lines of legal text. "Motion to reopen marital asset distribution. Unjust enrichment." The words clean and formal, the kind of language that turned a person's life into a procedural dispute. He took in the page the way he took in every document, completely, without reaction. He set it back down on the security desk. Then he looked at Serena, just for a moment, long enough to see the certainty sitting behind her eyes, the quiet confidence of a person who believed she had already won the opening move. "Have your office contact Harrison Reed," Reed said. "You have his number." He turned and walked back to the elevator. He did not look back. He pressed the button, stepped inside, and faced forward as the doors slid closed. But in the last half second before the polished steel panels met, he caught the lobby in the reflection of the doors, a compressed, distorted image like looking through still water. Serena stood exactly where he had left her, and the composed, engineered smile she had arrived with was gone. In its place was something smaller and less certain, a recalculation happening behind her eyes. She had expected something, pushback or pain or anger she could use, and he had given her nothing to work with, and she did not quite know what to do with that yet. The doors closed. He rode up in silence. When he stepped back into his office, Paige was still seated where he had left her. "Cause her." She looked at him once, that careful reading look she had, and said nothing. Reed sat down. He pulled the federal contract back in front of him and straightened the pages until the edges were perfectly aligned. "Get Harrison on the phone," he said. Paige reached for the handset without asking a single question. The drive to Decatur took minutes. Reed made it in silence, no music, just the hum of the engine and the Atlanta evening pressing in from all sides, the last orange light draining out of the sky, the highway signs catching it and throwing it back. He knew this drive by feel. He had made it countless times. In the worst months after the divorce, he had made it almost every week, showing up at Brooke's door with nothing but an overnight bag and the particular exhaustion of a man who had been grinding so long he had forgotten what it felt like to stop. She had never once made him feel like a burden. He parked in her driveway behind her silver SUV and sat for a moment with his hands in his lap. Through the front window, he could see the warm yellow light of her kitchen. A shadow moved across it. Brooke, probably finishing the dishes or checking homework or doing one of the 100 small domestic things that made her house feel like an actual home in a way his apartment had not for a long time. He got out and rang the bell. She answered in a university sweatshirt and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. A dish towel still over one shoulder, she took one look at his face and stepped back to let him in without a word. The house smelled like dinner, something with garlic, something warm. Her kids were already upstairs. The kitchen light was the same yellow he had stared at from her couch during the worst of it. Lying awake late at night with a legal pad balanced on his chest, running numbers that did not add up yet. Brooke poured sweet tea without asking. She set both glasses on the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from him. He told her everything. From the front desk call to the lobby, Serena's dress, her posture, the engineered smile, Elliot Greer and the leather portfolio. The motion slid across the security desk like it was already decided. He told her what Serena had said, word for word, because he remembered it exactly. He always remembered exactly. Brooke listened. She did not interrupt, which was unusual enough that he noticed it. She sat with both hands around her glass, watching him, and let him finish the whole thing before she said anything at all. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did Harrison keep everything?" "Every document," Reed said. "Every date? Everything." Brooke nodded once slowly the way she did when she was moving a piece into position in her mind. Reed took a long drink of his tea, set the glass down. Then he said, "There is something else, something I never told you." She waited. At the time of the divorce, he said, "I already had a verbal commitment from PharmCorp, the pharmaceutical distributor, my anchor client. They had told me they were ready to move forward. The relationship was real." He paused, but the contract was not signed yet. No signatures, no dates, nothing on paper. Brooke's eyes held steady on his face. "Harrison had been telling me for months to make sure every signature had a clean date," he continued. "He meant it as general counsel, just good practice. But by that point, I had started to suspect things were not right. A friend of ours, you do not know him well, he told me, quiet as he could, that Serena had been spending time with somebody he described as having real money." Reed said the phrase the same flat way it had been said to him. "I did not have proof, but I had enough." The kitchen was very still, so I called PharmCorp and told them I needed more time before we formalized anything. I told them it was an internal timing issue. He looked at his glass. It was not. I waited until after the papers were filed and the divorce was finalized, and then I signed. He looked up at Brooke. I did not hide anything. There was nothing to hide. The contract did not exist yet on paper. I just made sure that when it did exist, every date was clean, legal, documented. Harrison made sure of that. Brooke had not moved. She was looking at him the way she used to look at students she was deciding whether to believe. Except this was not skepticism. It was something closer to awe, slowly recognizing itself. "You already knew she was leaving," she said. "I suspected," Reed said. "So I got ready." The refrigerator hummed in the corner. Somewhere upstairs, one of the kids shifted in a creaking bed. The yellow kitchen light held them both in its small, warm circle. Brooke looked at her brother for a long moment, really looked at him, the gray at his temples, the steadiness in his eyes. The particular stillness of a man who had made his decisions and lived inside them cleanly. "Reed," she said. She said it quietly. "The way you say something when words are almost not enough for what you mean. You are your grandfather's child." He said nothing. He did not need to. He picked up his glass and they sat together in the quiet of her kitchen. And outside, the Atlanta night settled in around the house like it always had, indifferent to everything, patient as concrete, old as the ground itself. The call came in the morning. Reed was at his desk with coffee and the draft language for a contract amendment. The Atlanta skyline gray and low behind the windows, clouds sitting heavy on the city like a lid. Page had already been in and out twice. The day was moving the way good days moved, with purpose, without noise. Then his phone lit up. "Harrison, sit down," Harrison said before Reed could speak. "I am already sitting." "Good." A pause, the kind Harrison used when he was ordering his thoughts before he delivered them. "I have been doing discovery prep since yesterday afternoon. Background research, financial filings, public record pulls. I wanted to know exactly what we are dealing with before I said anything." "Tell me," Harrison told him. Victor Kane, the man Serena had left Reed for, the man with the real money, the real estate developer with the big name and the bigger condo, had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection months ago. Not a rumor. Court record. Filed in the Northern District of Georgia. Case number available to anyone who wanted to look. His real estate company, which had been valued on paper at a substantial amount, was worth far less after debt. Months of legal proceedings had already made that number worse. Staff had been laid off. 2 active development projects were frozen. His name, which had been attached to ribbon-cutting ceremonies and glossy investment brochures, had gone quiet in the business pages in a way that, once you knew what to look for, told the whole story. The luxury condo Serena had moved into was in foreclosure. Reed was quiet for a moment. He set down his pen. "What does her picture look like?" he asked. Harrison did not soften it. "Not good. The settlement money is gone. The house sale cleared a decent number when she moved in with Kane, but that was years ago and there is nothing left of it that we can find. Her spousal support ended months ago. She is on her hospital administrator salary, which is real money, but she is carrying expenses that salary was not sized for. The life she has been living cost more than Victor actually had." Another pause. "She did not come back because she believes she is owed something, Reed. She came back because she needs it. That contract going public gave her a number to chase and an address to walk to." Reed looked out the window. A pigeon was sitting on the ledge across the street, perfectly still, doing nothing in particular. "What does she actually have?" he said. "Legally." Harrison was precise about it because Harrison was always precise. The original waiver was strong. Serena had signed away all interest in the company in clear language, on record, with her own attorney present. Reed's timing on the FarmCorp contract gave them clean post-divorce dates on every document that mattered. On the foundational question of marital equity in the company, she had almost nothing. "But her attorney is not arguing marital equity," Harrison said. "He is smarter than that. He is arguing unjust enrichment. The theory is that Serena's income, her salary, her benefits, her financial stability, is what allowed you to take entrepreneurial risks you could not have taken on your own. That she was the floor you built on, that without her holding the household together, there would have been nothing to grow. A beat. It is not a frivolous argument. I need you to hear that. Some judges have found it compelling. The right courtroom, the right presentation, the right optics. It is not a slam dunk for us. How messy could it get? A year or more. Real legal fees, real depositions. And even if we win, which I believe we would, it becomes a story. The press has already picked up the contract announcement, add a divorce claim, and it becomes a different kind of story." The pigeon on the ledge shifted, then settled again. Reed thought about Serena in the lobby. The composed smile, the tilt of her head, the way she had said the contract amount, like she was simply reading a number off a page, neutral and factual, when what she was actually doing was telling him she had been watching, that she had seen it, that she had waited to see how big it got before she moved. He thought about the document she had signed years ago, her own words notarized. "I want nothing to do with that business." She had called it a liability. He picked up his pen. "Then we do not litigate it away," he said. "We end it." Harrison was quiet for half a second. "How?" "The way I end everything," Reed said completely. The records came up on a Wednesday. Reed had asked Page for them days after Harrison's call. All incorporation documents, operating agreements, and financial filings predating the divorce. Everything from the first year of the company forward. Page did not ask why. She simply said she would have them pulled and organized by end of day. And she did, because that was how Page operated. By late afternoon, a thick manila folder was sitting on the edge of his desk with a sticky note on the front that said, "Pre-divorce. All of it. P." He did not open it right away. He let it sit there while he finished the rest of his afternoon. There was work to do, and the work did not stop because his ex-wife had walked into his lobby with a leather portfolio lawyer. He answered emails. He reviewed a vendor proposal. He signed off on a staffing change in the Charlotte office. Then, when the floor had emptied and the city outside was going amber and gold, he opened the folder. He read for some time. At that point, he picked up his phone and called Wes Langston. Wes answered on the second ring, the way he always did, like he had been expecting the call and saw no point in pretending otherwise. "Reed." His voice was low and unhurried, the voice of a man who had been in enough rooms to know that most things worth saying did not need to be rushed. "I heard about the contract. Front page of the business section." "Yeah," Reed said. "That is part of what I am calling about." A short silence. Then Wes said, "She came back." It was not a question. She came back. Reed confirmed. Wes exhaled slowly through his nose. Reed could picture him exactly, sitting in the leather chair in his home office in Stone Mountain, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a half-empty glass of something on the table beside him. "Tell me what you need," Wes said. Reed told him. He walked Wes through what Harrison had filed, what Greer was arguing, and what the records in front of him were showing him, or more precisely confirming, because reading through those early documents was not teaching him anything new. It was just putting numbers and dates on things he had already lived, things he had never forgotten, even when he had tried to set them down. Wes filled in the parts that the paper could not capture. The first near death had come early on. Reed had landed a mid-size pharmaceutical distributor as a client. Real money, real potential, but the payment cycles were long and the gap between what he was owed and what he had to spend nearly swallowed the company whole. He needed funds to cover the cash flow difference, just a bridge, a line of credit, nothing exotic. The bank would do it with a co-signer. He had asked Serena. She had said no, not quietly, not apologetically, on the record. She had spoken with the loan officer directly and stated in language the bank documented in writing that the business was not creditworthy and that she was unwilling to attach her name to it. The file in front of Reed had the bank's notation right there in plain type. He had borrowed the money from Brooke and Wes instead. Brooke had given him funds from her savings, money she had documented as a personal loan with repayment terms because Brooke documented everything. Wes had covered the remaining amount. Reed had repaid both of them in full, with interest he insisted on, within months. "I remember sitting across from you at that diner on Peachtree," Wes said. "You had the bank letter in your hand. I asked you what Serena said, and you just looked at me for a second and said she had concerns." He made a short sound that was not quite a laugh. I knew what that meant. Reed said nothing. "The second time was worse," Wes continued, "when the Kellner account blew up. Reed remembered it without needing Wes to remind him. A logistics error, the wrong routing on a temperature-sensitive shipment, had nearly cost him his largest client at the time. He had spent weeks working around the clock to fix it. Phone calls late at night, revised proposals, site visits. He had rebuilt that relationship one conversation at a time, and he had done it while running on little sleep and whatever was left in the coffee machine. Serena had gone to Savannah that same week, a trip with friends she had been planning, she said. She came home later with a tan and a complaint that she felt neglected. She wanted a vacation, a real one, somewhere warm. He had not said much. He had gone back to work. "She did not put $1 into that company," Wes said. His voice was even, not angry, just stating the arithmetic of it. "She did not sign for it. She did not sit up with it when it was sick. She bet against you, Reed. She looked at what you were building and she put her money on you failing." A pause. "She lost. And now she wants to collect on a ticket she already threw away." Reed looked at the bank refusal document in the folder, the date on it, the neat institutional language of it. Ms. Hargrove declined to serve as co-signatory, citing concerns regarding the applicant business's creditworthiness. He called Harrison next and told him about the bank document. Harrison said he wanted the original or a certified copy in the file by Friday. He said it the way he said most things, quietly, with the certainty of a man who had already decided what was going to happen next. After he hung up with Harrison, Reed sat alone in the office. The folder was open in front of him. The refusal document, Brooks' loan receipt, dated and signed, Wes's repayment record, the Farm Corp contract with its clean post-divorce date sitting right there at the top of the signature page, Serena's own statement from the original divorce deposition in which she had described the company as financially distressed and not an asset I want to be associated with. He read through all of it slowly, the way he read everything that mattered. Each page was one more wall in something that was becoming very solid. The petition arrived on a Thursday morning. Harrison called Reed early to walk him through it before the day got away from them. He spoke in his usual manner, measured, precise. No wasted words, but Reed could hear something underneath the economy of it, a careful quality. The voice Harrison used when he wanted to make sure his client understood something fully before reacting to it. Greer is smarter than I initially gave him credit for, Harrison said. He is not going after marital equity in the company. He abandoned that angle, probably knew the waiver would kill it quickly. So he went sideways, unjust enrichment. Reed said, unjust enrichment. Harrison confirmed. The argument is this. Serena's salary covered your household operating costs for the duration of the marriage. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance. Her medical benefits covered you both, including during the years you had no coverage of your own. By keeping the household financially stable, she freed you up to take entrepreneurial risks you could not have taken otherwise. She did not invest in the company directly. The argument goes, she invested in the conditions that made the company possible. A short pause. It is a framing argument, Harrison continued. Technically accurate in the narrowest sense, she did earn income. The household bills were paid, and he will have documentation on all of it. A short pause. I want you to hear me say this plainly, Reed. This argument has moved judges before, not often, but enough times that I will not call it frivolous. Greer knows what he is doing. I know, Reed said. The deposition is still on for Tuesday. You will be present. You will not need to say much. I know, Reed said. I just need to be in the room. Harrison's conference room was on an upper floor of a building on Peachtree Center Avenue. Clean lines, neutral colors, a long mahogany table that had witnessed 100 versions of this particular kind of reckoning. Reed arrived first. He poured himself a glass of water, sat down on his side of the table, and waited. Serena came in minutes later, Greer at her shoulder. She looked good. That had not changed. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, her hair pulled back in a way that was professional without being severe. She carried herself the way she always had, with a composed, unhurried ease, like a woman who had decided in advance how the room was going to feel about her, and saw no reason to doubt her own judgment. Her eyes found Reed immediately when she entered. He met them without expression. Then he looked down at the notepad in front of him and made a small mark on it. Nothing meaningful, just the motion of a man settling in for work, and did not look up again until the court reporter called for attention. The deposition began. Serena was polished. She had been coached well, and she wore the coaching naturally, which made it more effective. She spoke about the early years of the marriage with a quiet steadiness that was easy to find sympathetic. A woman who had worked hard, carried a household, supported a husband's ambitions without complaint, and asked for very little in return. I was the financial anchor, she said at one point, her voice calm and factual. Reed had the vision. I had the stable income. I made sure the lights stayed on and the mortgage was paid while he built what he was building. I did not begrudge that. I believed in our life together. None of it was false. The lights had stayed on. The mortgage had been paid. She had worked and her income had been real. But she was describing the walls of a room and calling it the architecture of the house. Reed sat across the table and said almost nothing. He answered the procedural questions when they were directed at him. He did not interrupt. He did not shift in his chair. He simply listened to her the way you listen to something you have already fully understood and watched. For most of the deposition, Serena did not look directly at him. She kept her attention on Greer, on Harrison, on the court reporter's moving fingers. Her performance was smooth and consistent. Then, partway through, she said something about the household insurance and glanced across the table to gauge the room and found Reed looking at her. Not with anger, not with contempt, with nothing at all. Just watching, completely still, like a man sitting in a room where he already knew every word that was going to be said before anyone said it. Her next sentence came out fractionally slower than the one before it. A beat, barely noticeable. Her gaze moved away from his and back to Harrison, and she recovered smoothly, but the recovery itself was the tell. She had expected something from him, some visible reaction, some sign that she was landing. There was nothing to find. The deposition concluded after some time. Serena and Greer gathered their materials and left the conference room with the measured courtesy of people who believed they had performed well. The door closed. Harrison stacked his notes and looked across the table at Reed. "You ready to show them what we have?" Reed capped his pen. "Not yet," he said. "Let her feel safe a little longer." Harrison nodded once, slow, deliberate, the nod of a man who recognized the difference between a client who was reacting and a client who was positioning. He picked up his notes and said nothing further. Harrison called Brooke that evening. Reed had asked him to make the call personally, not because Brooke needed the formality, but because Harrison's voice carried a specific gravity that made people understand something mattered without him having to say so twice. Brooke picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Whitfield Cross," Harrison said, "I am calling at your brother's request. I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to take your time before you answer." "Go ahead." "In the period before the divorce, the months leading up to the filing, did you retain any documentation of conversations you had with Serena Langford, written, electronic, or recorded?" A short silence. "What kind of documentation?" Brooke asked. "Any kind," Harrison said. "Texts, emails, voice recordings, anything that captured her words directly." Another silence, longer this time. "Let me check something," Brooke said. "I will call you back." She went to her phone's voice memo folder, the way she went to everything, efficiently, without drama. The folder was long, years of entries, most of them labeled with dates and short descriptions in her own shorthand. Parent conference, Johnson family, discipline hearing, dozens of them. It was a habit she had built slowly over her years as a vice principal, born out of one bad afternoon when a parent had disputed something she said in a meeting and she had no record to stand on. After that, she recorded not every conversation, but the ones that turned adversarial, the ones where she felt the ground shift under her and knew from experience that the shift mattered. She scrolled back further into the older files, the ones with timestamps from before Reed's divorce. She almost missed it. The label just said, S-Call. Serena before she stopped using her married name. Brooke pressed play and held the phone to her ear, her own voice first, cautious and measured, the way it got when she was already recording. "I think that man is going to be extraordinary." Then Serena's voice, smooth, unhurried, carrying the particular tone of someone who had already made up their mind and was being patient about it. "I hope you are right, Brooke. I really do, but I cannot afford to bet my life on a hope." Brooke stood in her kitchen for a moment without moving. Then she called Harrison back. She brought the phone to his office the next morning before work. Harrison had a technician copy the file, verify the metadata, and produce a written transcript. The authentication took the rest of the afternoon. By late afternoon, Harrison had a certified copy of the transcript in a manila folder on his desk. He called Reed. Reed came in later. He sat across from Harrison and read the transcript once. The whole thing was short. He read it slowly, the way he read contracts, taking in each line completely before moving to the next. When he finished, he set it down on Harrison's desk. He was quiet for a long moment. His hands were flat on the table. He was not clenching them. Harrison did not fill the silence. Outside the window, Atlanta was moving through its early evening. Headlights, the low hum of traffic on Peachtree, the slow dimming of the sky over the buildings. Reed looked at the transcript once more without picking it up. Then he said, "Add it to the file." Harrison nodded and did exactly that. The following morning, Reed was at his desk reviewing logistics projections with Paige when his front desk called up. "Mr. Langford, there is a man in the lobby asking to see you. He does not have an appointment. He says his name is Victor Kane." Paige looked up from her laptop. She kept her expression neutral, but her eyes asked the question. Reed thought for seconds. "Tell him I will be down." Victor was standing near the building's front windows when Reed stepped out of the elevator. He was wearing a dark suit that had been expensive once. You could still see it in the cut, the fabric, but it hung on him slightly differently now, like a man who had lost weight he had not meant to lose. His posture was upright but effortful, the way people stand when they are working at it. He extended his hand when Reed approached. Reed shook it. "Appreciate you coming down," Victor said. "Follow me," Reed said. He took Victor to the small conference room off the main hallway, not his office, the small one. 4 chairs, a narrow table, no view. He closed the door and sat down across from him. Victor opened with the pitch smoothly enough, all things considered. There was a development project in need of logistics support, regional supply chain work. He had been following Langford Supply Group's trajectory and felt there could be a natural alignment. Maybe this whole legal situation could be resolved more amicably if both parties could find a way to. Reed's voice was quiet. Level. Why are you here? Not what you are saying. Why are you actually here? Victor stopped. The room went still. He looked down at the table for a moment, then back up. The pitch was gone from his face. What was underneath it was smaller and more honest. She is going to lose, is not she? He said. Not a question. Yes, Reed said. Victor nodded slowly, and then she will know she spent everything. He said it like a man reciting a sentence he had already tried and failed to rewrite. And she will look at me and... That is between you and her, Reed said. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and opened the conference room door. Victor did not move for a moment. Then he got up, picked up his portfolio, and walked toward the lobby without another word. Reed went directly to Page's desk. Document that visit, he said. Time, date, who he is, what he said, full summary. Page was already reaching for her keyboard. The building was quiet later. The cleaning crew had come and gone. The receptionist had locked the front desk. Page had stopped by his doorway, coat on, bag over her shoulder, and said, "Go home at a reasonable hour," the way she always did, not quite a request, not quite a command. He had nodded. She had not believed him. She was right not to. Reed was still at his desk later. The city laid out behind him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows like something from a picture he would not have let himself imagine back when pictures like this felt like someone else's life. Harrison's binder was open in front of him. It was thorough. It was the kind of document that made arguments feel unnecessary, the kind that simply presented the truth in sequence and let the sequence do the work. Tab by tab. The bank refusal, Brooks' loan receipts, Wes's affidavit, Page's signed and notarized, the anchor contract with its clean post-divorce date, Serena's own words from the original divorce deposition printed in plain black type on white paper, and at the back, in a clear plastic sleeve, the certified transcript of a phone call Serena had made years ago to a woman she believed would stay quiet. He read through it slowly, not because he needed to. He had read it before. He knew every page. He read it the way you revisit something to make sure it is still real. He thought about the spare bedroom, not this building, not these windows. A bedroom in a rented house in East Point with the second-hand desk pushed against the wall and a lamp he had bought at a garage sale because the overhead light buzzed and he could not concentrate. A used laptop, a printed list of cold call numbers, each one marked with a pen after he had dialed it. A dot for no answer. A line through it for a hard no, a small star for callback. He had made those calls late at night because late at night was the only hour he had. Every other hour belonged to the day job, the commute, the bills, the careful management of a household that required two incomes to stay level. He had come home from work, eaten whatever was in the refrigerator, and sat down at that second-hand desk and dialed. Serena had been asleep down the hall on most of those nights, or she had been awake and had not come in to ask how it was going. He could not remember a single time she had come in to ask how it was going. He did not think about this with bitterness. It was just a fact, like the date on a document. It either was or it was not. He thought about the kitchen table. He had refinished it himself early in their marriage, stripped it down to bare wood, restained it a dark walnut, sealed it with coats until it looked like something from a showroom. He had been proud of it in the uncomplicated way you are proud of something you made with your hands. Serena had approved of the result, which at the time had felt like enough. That was the table she slid the papers across. He remembered the morning clearly, the light coming through the kitchen window, the coffee he had not touched, the way she sat across from him, straight-backed, composed, unhurried. She did not look like someone in pain. She looked like someone who had completed a process. The papers were already drawn up. The attorney was already retained. There were no raised voices because there was nothing left to argue about. She had already left. The conversation was administrative. She had not wanted anything to do with the company. She had said so. She had written it down and signed her name beneath it. He had let her go. He had gone back to the spare bedroom. Not that bedroom, but the same impulse, the same desk, the same late-night discipline, and he had built. He did not feel rage sitting in his office with the binder open in front of him. Rage was too hot, too fast, too imprecise. Rage was for people who had been surprised. He had not been surprised. He had been prepared. There was a difference, and it was the difference that had mattered. What he felt was quieter than rage and more complete. It was the feeling of a man who had done the work, kept the records, and waited. Not impatiently, not with clenched teeth, but with the steady knowledge that the truth was documented and the documents would hold. He closed the binder. He picked up his phone and called Harrison. Harrison answered on the first ring. "You still in the office?" "Yes," Reed said. "I want to confirm the conference for tomorrow morning." "Before the hearing?" Harrison said. Greer confirmed. "Serena will be there." A pause. "Brooke still's coming?" "She is." A brief silence. "You sure about that piece? Bringing her sister?" "She needs one person in that room," Reed said, "who will tell her the truth." Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay. Good night, Harrison. Good night." Reed set the phone down. He looked at the binder once more, then closed it and squared it neatly at the edge of his desk. He stood, shut off the office lights, and took the elevator down. He drove home through the Atlanta night. Not anxious, not angry, simply ready. Harrison's conference room was on an upper floor of a building blocks from the courthouse. It was a serious room. Dark wood table, chairs, a credenza along one wall with water and glasses nobody ever touched before morning. The kind of room where people came to finalize things. The framed degrees on the wall were not decorative. Neither was the man who had earned them. Reed arrived first. He set two identical binders on the table, one at Greer's expected seat, one at Serena's, and sat down across from both positions. Harrison came in minutes later with his briefcase and a paper cup of coffee, checked that the recorder was charged, and set it face down on the credenza without comment. Greer arrived. He was polished and professional, leather portfolio under one arm, the practiced ease of a man who had done this many times. He took in the binders on the table and said nothing, but Reed saw his eyes move to them and stay there for just a half-second longer than was casual. Serena came in behind him. She was dressed well, charcoal blazer, hair back, the same composed readiness she had worn in the lobby and in the deposition room. She was good at walking into rooms. She always had been. Then she saw Brooke seated quietly near the window, and the composure slipped, just for a moment, just long enough to be real. "Brooke," her voice was careful. "What are you doing here?" Brooke met her sister's eyes. "Reed called me," she said simply. "I came." Serena looked at Reed. He was already seated, hands folded on the table in front of him, watching her with the same still expression he had worn across from her in the deposition room. He did not look like a man preparing to argue. He looked like a man who had already finished. "Sit down," he said. "Not unkind, just certain." She sat. Reed opened without preamble. "I am not here to negotiate," he said. "I am here to show you what exists. After that, you are going to make a decision." He nodded once to Harrison, who slid a copy of the binder to Greer. "Tab 1, Reed said. "The bank refusal." 2 pages, official letterhead. Serena's name printed clearly in the denial section. The reason given, co-signer declined to participate. Her own signature on the refusal form below it. Greer opened his copy. His face stayed professional, but his eyes moved carefully over the document. Tab 2, Brooke's loan receipt. Personal funds documented as a private loan. Repayment records attached. The money that had kept the company alive when the bank said no. Money that came from his sister's savings account, not from any joint marital account, not from anything Serena had touched or offered. Tab 3, Wes Langston's affidavit. Pages, plain language, specific figures, specific details. Wes had been there. Wes had loaned money. Wes had watched the company nearly die and watched Reed keep it breathing by himself. The affidavit did not editorialize. It simply said what happened, and what happened was enough. Greer turned to the tab and read slowly. The practiced ease in his posture had begun to settle into something quieter. Tab 4, the anchor contract. The signed date at the bottom was after the divorce was finalized, not during the marriage, not during any period Serena had contributed to or participated in after. Clean and documented and unambiguous. Serena had not opened her binder. She was watching Reed. "Tab 5, he said. He watched her open it now, watched her eyes find the document, her own words from her own deposition in the original divorce proceedings transcribed and printed. "Financially distressed and not an asset I want to be associated with." Her signature at the bottom of the original deposition acknowledgement. She had said it under oath. She had meant it. She had been wrong about it, and the wrongness was now sitting on a conference table in front of her in a clear plastic sleeve. The room was very quiet. Harrison stood, walked to the credenza, and picked up the recorder. He set it on the table in the middle of the room and pressed play without announcing what it was. The recording was clean. Brooke's phone had captured it clearly, the way phones do when they are held still and the room is quiet. Serena's own voice came out of the small speaker. "I hope you are right, Brooke, but I cannot afford to bet my life on a hope." Harrison stopped the recording. No one spoke. Greer looked at his client. The expression on his face was not the expression of a man reassessing his argument. It was the expression of a man who understood he did not have one. Serena was very still. Reed closed his binder. "I built this alone," he said. His voice was even. "No heat in it. No performance. You made sure of that when you left. You declined to sign. You declined to invest. You said what you said to my sister, and you said what you said in court, and you put your name under all of it." He let that sit for exactly one breath. "You are entitled to what I built after you walked away." He looked across the table. "Dismiss the motion today, and we are finished. You walk out of here, and we never speak again." A pause. "If you do not, every document in this binder becomes public record. Every word, every detail, every signature." He turned to Brooke. "I called you," he said, "because she deserves one person in this room who will actually be honest with her." Brooke had been still and watchful through all of it. Now she turned to her sister. The two women looked at each other, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with lawyers or documents. Something older than that. Something that belonged only to the two of them. "Serena," Brooke said quietly, "let it go." Serena said nothing, but the thing behind her eyes, that careful, composed calculation she had carried in from the door, shifted. Something gave way in it slowly, like a structure finally admitting the weight it had been holding. For the first time since she had walked into his lobby with a lawyer and a leather portfolio and a smile that did not reach her eyes, Serena Langford looked like a woman who understood she had already lost. Judge Evelyn Hart ran a quiet courtroom. No excess. No ceremony beyond what the law required. She had been on the bench for years, and the economy of her manner, the way she moved through proceedings without wasted motion, told you everything about how she felt about people who wasted her time. Reed sat at the respondent's table with Harrison. Serena and Greer sat across the aisle. The room was small, wood-paneled, fluorescent lit. Not dramatic, just official. Greer stood when called upon and stated clearly for the record that his client was voluntarily withdrawing the motion. Judge Hart looked over her glasses at him. Then she looked at Serena. "Ms. Hargrove." She used the maiden name from the filing. "You understand that this withdrawal is with prejudice. That means you cannot refile on this same claim. Not next month, not next year, not ever." She let that land. "Do you understand that?" Serena sat straight. Her voice was composed and clean. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Hart held her gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at the paperwork in front of her, made a notation, and said without looking up, "Motion withdrawn with prejudice. Matter is closed." She turned a page. That was it. Years on the bench. She had seen this exact shape of mistake countless times from countless different directions. She did not editorialize. She simply moved to the next file. In the hallway outside, Harrison shook Reed's hand. It was a firm handshake, the kind that meant something from a man who did not offer things that did not. Harrison allowed himself one small nod, the closest he came to visible satisfaction, and then he opened his briefcase and put the file away. "I will send the final billing by end of week," he said. "Thank you, Harrison," Reed said, "for all of it." Harrison nodded again. Briefcase closed. "Do not let anyone else make you come back here." Reed almost smiled. "I will not." He walked out of the building and into the Atlanta morning. The air was warm. Traffic moved on the street. Somewhere nearby, a delivery truck idled at a light, its engine steady and unhurried. He did not look back at the courthouse doors. He did not wait to see Serena emerge. There was nothing left to witness. He went back to work. Weeks later, a regional business outlet ran a short item. Langford Supply Group founder defeats post-divorce equity claim. The piece was paragraphs. It cited the public court record, noted the post-divorce contract date, and quoted the with prejudice dismissal order. It did not quote the recording. It did not need to. The article circulated in Atlanta business circles the way small items do, quietly, thoroughly, person to person. People who knew Reed read it and were not surprised. People who did not know him read it and remembered his name. Serena's name did not appear in the article. It did not have to. The world she worked in was not large, and the story found its way there on its own. Months after the article ran, she was quietly passed over for a department chief role she had been building toward. No explanation was given. None was needed. The door simply closed without ceremony, the way consequences often do. Victor's bankruptcy finalized that fall. The condo was surrendered. They moved to a 2-bedroom rental in a part of Atlanta that was perfectly decent and nothing like what she had imagined her life would look like. Reed did not track any of this. He learned about it the way you learn about weather that passed through a place you used to live. Incidentally, without looking for it. Years passed. The federal contract renewed early, ahead of schedule on the strength of Langford Supply Group's performance metrics. Hundreds of employees now spread across Atlanta, Charlotte, and Houston. The Charlotte office had been open some time. Houston was newer. Both were profitable. Reed created a new role in the company's facilities management division and gave it to his father. He called him on an evening to offer it, sitting in his car in the parking garage after a late meeting, because he did not want to do it over email and he did not want to wait. His father listened and then he cried, quietly, in the specific way of men from his generation, who cry, which is mostly just a long silence and a changed quality in the breathing. Reed looked at the concrete wall of the parking garage and waited because there was nothing to say that would be better than the silence. Director of Facilities Legacy. He had written the title himself. He had thought about it for weeks before he wrote it down. Brooke found out about it later, the way Brooke found out about everything, ahead of schedule and without being told directly. She announced it at Sunday dinner to the whole family before their father had gotten around to mentioning it himself. Their father pretended to be annoyed. Nobody believed him. Brooke and Reed had standing lunch every other week. He had tried to cancel twice. Both times she had called back within minutes and said no. He stopped trying. Wes Langston, who had signed an affidavit when signing one meant something, received a referral from Reed months after the court date. A mid-sized Atlanta manufacturer looking for a business consultant. Wes landed the account. It tripled his own firm's revenue inside a year. Reed had made the call, himself unprompted, on a morning because Wes had shown up when it mattered, and that was not the kind of thing Reed forgot. Brooke called once not to report on her sister, not to apologize on her behalf. Just a short call, direct and warm. "I hope you are doing well, Reed," she said. "I am," he said. He meant it. Isla was a landscape architect. She had her own firm, her own opinions, and absolutely no interest in the mythology that had begun to form around Reed's name in certain Atlanta circles. She had met him at a fundraiser for a local youth program. Neither of them had expected to find interesting, and she had spent the first minutes of their conversation arguing with him about whether the city was doing enough to preserve its old-growth tree canopy. He had thought about her for days afterward. She had never asked about his ex-wife. She knew the broad shape of it. Divorced, complicated years ago. And she had no investment in the details. She was interested in him, the specific, actual him. What he ate for breakfast and why he still kept a legal pad on his nightstand, and whether he thought the new highway expansion was going to destroy the West Side neighborhoods the way people were saying. It was, he had slowly come to understand, what it was always supposed to feel like. One evening in late September, they were sitting on the back porch of the house he owned outright. A house with a yard, old oak trees, a porch wide enough to actually use. The sky had gone orange and then purple above the tree line. Isla had a glass of wine. Reed had been quiet for a few minutes in the way he sometimes went quiet, looking at nothing in particular, thinking something through. She watched him for a moment. "What do you think about?" she asked. "When you go quiet like that?" He considered it. He gave the question the honest attention it deserved. "The spare bedroom," he said, "where I started. I think about how small the room was." He paused, and how none of it mattered in the end. She nodded slowly. She did not ask him to explain further. She understood. Not all of it. Maybe not most of it, but enough. Enough to know that the question had been answered fully, and that the man sitting next to her had come a very long way to be this still. The sky darkened. The oak trees held their shape against it. He did not think about Serena often. Weeks would pass without her crossing his mind at all. but occasionally sitting in a first-class seat on a flight to Washington or watching a pen move across the bottom of a contract with more zeros than he had once let himself believe was possible for a man with his last name and his starting point. He thought about one document, one she had signed with her own hand, in her own words, of her own free will. "I want nothing to do with that business." He had given her exactly what she asked for. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you do not miss the next story. I have picked out 2 more for you that I think you will really like.